I would say good afternoon, but I think we're getting a good evening. Little marathon meeting there. Again, thank you all for joining us on this evening as we talk about victims' justice. We experience a high number of incidents of violent crime on the west side of Chicago. Lots of victims, lots of families that are broken in this trend of violence. And we want to commend the mayor and her team for putting forth an ordinance that we believe will have an impact on individuals' abilities to continue in this criminal enterprise. Most of the cases that we see, especially on the west side of Chicago, revolve around narcotics, territory, and the fruits or the benefits thereof. And so utilizing this portion of the statute, I think is innovative in a way to go after those individuals that are portraying the most harm in our communities. So just like everyone else, people just want to have a decent place to live, a community, and go out and sit on their porches and enjoy life. But with the activities that exist around the sale of narcotics and the violence that always goes with it, that has become a challenge. And so the ordinance as presented would help work to curb that and look at the financial assets of these individuals as these folks portray not only the violence that hurts our communities, but the victims and the tracks they leave behind. So we are definitely working together on trying to find a way to deal not only with the physical cost, but the mental cost that our communities have endured and will continue to endure around this issue of violence. So we want to stand with the mayor on this particular issue and work with her, because the violence that we see not only on the west side but on the south side and across our city is crippling and is our #1 concern that we have to deal with, along with economic development, but crime and the victims and what it creates, and the violence has truly had the impact on the communities and stunted growth and ended lives. As others have said, we bury dreams on a daily basis, and we need to get out of that and start beginning to go after the assets and the funds of these individuals and the crime and the victims they leave behind and the hurt that they've caused our community. So I thought I would bring up our Mayor Lightfoot.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. On my first day as mayor, and reflecting on a number of different things, I did say that there's no higher calling for me than restoring the safety and peace in our neighborhoods. Since that first day, we've been using every tool at our disposal just to do that. But we continue to be challenged in our city. Not only have we deployed CPD resources to support violent reduction efforts in our most impacted neighborhoods, but we've also leveraged resources and partnerships with nearly all of our city departments and agencies, which has allowed us to expand city services and outreach, transforming our neighborhoods and more. Simultaneously, through citywide initiatives like Invest Southwest, we have delivered and will continue to deliver what I hope is catalytic socioeconomic investments to our most underserved communities, investments that will increase safety in addition to opportunity. Making these investments in opportunity is especially important for our young people as they navigate through their lives' choices. We are providing our youth with education and employment opportunities so that they may embark on a fulsome, successful life path, and one that doesn't include violence. All of these investments, programs, and efforts work together holistically to improve our residents' quality of life while making a multi-pronged approach to violence reduction. But there's more to be done. That's why earlier today, during City Council, we proposed another tool to restore safety and peace in our city, the Victims' Justice Ordinance. Unfortunately, it also became clear earlier that not all of the members of the City Council understand how vitally important it is for us to protect victims of gang violence. And they'll have to answer to their constituents for that. So although this ordinance has been sent to the Rules Committee and will now be reviewed on Friday, and my hope is to be disgorged to the Public Safety Committee, know that our fight for victims must continue and will continue. And I encourage a speedy review and eventual passage of this critical piece of legislation. And I want to thank the members of the body who are here with me today, Alderman Thompson, Alderman Curtis, Alderman Irvin, and Alderman Quinn. And I want to thank the other sponsors of the ordinance and more to come. The Victims' Justice Ordinance is a civil remedy that directly targets the gang leadership and others who wield guns and drive violence in our city by seizing the assets that fuel and perpetuate their lifestyle. To be very blunt and clear, we are going after their blood money, money that they have profited from the killing of innocents in our neighborhoods, our children, our elders, and others that they indiscriminately kill in their quest for profits in this business that they are in. We have to move and strike hard but decisive blows against these gang members. What I know is this: there are residents all across our city, in virtually every neighborhood, who do not feel safe. And they do not feel safe because of violent criminal gangs. We have to address those fears. We have to never forget the victims and the survivors and the witnesses who every single day are being challenged by violent criminal enterprises that profit from the chaos that they wreak in our neighborhoods. So this ordinance aims to recover compensatory and punitive damages, forfeiture of property, abatement, and injunctive relief. As it now stands, gang members are able to thrive in our city by recruiting and corrupting our most vulnerable residents, especially those that are young, by flaunting a lavish lifestyle of money, cars, jewelry, and guns. It's become clear that it's not enough to go after these gangs and their members through criminal courts. That is why this proposed ordinance activates our civil courts and our corporation council to stem the influence and power that gangs have over our residents and our neighborhoods. This method of going after gangs' profit motives is not a novel idea. Some years back, the Illinois General Assembly passed the Illinois Street Gang Terrorism Omnibus Prevention Act, which allows states' attorneys to file a civil lawsuit against gangs and gang members who engage in a pattern of criminal activity. Our proposed ordinance mirrors many of the provisions of that act, but authorizes the city through the Corporation Council to file civil claims against these gangs. This ordinance thus not only aims to disrupt the livelihood and power of gangs by seizing their assets, it will provide another tool for the city to fight these violent criminal gangs. It will also remedy the neighborhoods and the residents who are under siege. The ordinance stipulates that a minimum of 50% of monetary fines recovered will be dedicated to support victims of and witnesses to gang-related activity. The ordinance will require proof that any named gang member who has committed at least 2 criminal acts within the preceding 5 years would be eligible for prosecution under the civil procedure. One of which must be the violent act, one of which must involve a violent or predatory felony motivated by gang-related profit and proof that the defendant's acts impose costs upon the city. The Corporation Council will be authorized to work with the Chicago Police Department and other law enforcement bodies across our city, county, and state and federal law enforcement to gather information and potentially any other relevant acts to prove up the acts alleged in a complaint. We will go to work. We'll go about this work maintaining the constitutional right of every citizen to remain a top priority. We will not interfere with the free exercise of constitutionally protected freedom of expression and association. Any defendants identified through this ordinance will maintain the right to petition lawfully constitutional authority for redress and perceived grievances. And let me be clear, because there's been a lot of conversation about this proposed ordinance. We are not targeting the guys on the corner, the small players, their families are single communities. But we are very much so targeting the gang leadership that profits from drug sales, organized criminal activity, and the violence that is perpetrated in our streets on a daily basis. And we intend to hold them to account. And throughout this work, we will continue to offer to those who have been involved in gang activity every opportunity to peacefully exit the lifestyle. We know that there are many young men that are out there, many, and women, who are involved in this lifestyle that got caught up, who want to come home. They want to exit the lifestyle. And we have to continue to make sure that we're providing opportunities and support for them to do just that. But the leadership's repeated failure to recognize the sanctity of life, the continued senseless murder of our residents, including our children, demands that we act. And they leave us no choice but to go after them with every tool at our disposal. Immediately upon passage of this ordinance, we will begin the important work. And gang members, we want to make sure that you hear us. We will not rest until we bring you to account. Put down the guns, stop the violence, but if you choose to continue, then we will hold you accountable. We cannot give drivers of violence one moment of peace or security as long as they continue to terrorize our streets. And it remains all of our highest priority, protect our residents' right to live, as Alderman Irving said, a peaceful life, free from fear, intimidation, and physical harm. Now, before I close, I want to take a moment to address other issues that came up during City Council. Earlier today, there were a couple other notable events. I'm pleased to announce my nomination of Eileen Velasquez as the next Chief Procurement Officer. Eileen has a wealth of experience in procurement in both the public and private sector, and I look forward to her having an opportunity to share with members of the council her experience and her vision for the Department of Procurement Services. Also today, Cole Stoddard was nominated as the next Commissioner of Streets and Sanitation. I've received numerous comments from members of this body, but also outside of it, commending us on our recommendation of Cole Stoddard to be the next Commissioner of Streets and Sanitation. And I also look forward for him to be able to share his vision for the department, and in addition to the diverse leadership team that he is assembling. And finally, I also wanted to note that today, the City Council, with the support and leadership of Chairman Irvin, passed an extension of the city's Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise Program. The City of Chicago is one of the few cities in the nation that continues to have an MBE-WBE program based upon race and ethnicity. I think the folks that were involved in the disparity study, and I want to particularly thank our expert, Colette Holt, and her team, have done a yeoman's job of demonstrating why this program is so vitally important, but also laying the factual basis based upon surveying small businesses all across the city about what their opportunities are, but also what the challenges are. This, to me, is a floor of what must be done, and we will continue looking for innovative ways to make sure that we create and open up opportunities for women, minority, veterans, and LGBTQ plus businesses to be able to have access to contracts from the city, but challenge the private sector to really live your values on supplier diversity and make sure you're hiring these great men and women that run these small businesses. With that, I will open it up for any questions that you may have.
Members of the press, we will have 2 questions per reporter. We're going to start off with Alex Newton.
Are we giving him the microphone? Oh,
One sec.
let me welcome Chairman Taliaferro. Mr. Chairman, I before we open up for questions, I'm happy to give the floor to you to comment on the ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And let me say thank you very much for your leadership in bringing this very important ordinance to the city of Chicago. Look, I look at it like this. We know that we have a city that has an increased number in shootings and violence, and a lot of this crime is being perpetrated by gang members. But if we stop trying, if we stop putting forth initiatives that will help to reduce violence in this city, to protect our families, to protect our children, our seniors, then we fail you as a city council. And this is a very important measure that the mayor and these council members that stand here in support of this are ready to do, and that's create new initiatives, ones that are bold, ones that are willing to stand in controversy, so that we can make sure that we have a better city to live in. So, Mayor, I thank you so much for your continued leadership. What else does a gang member hold near and dear to his heart? It's money. It's not his loyal followers. It's not the drugs themselves that they're out selling and peddling, but they hold their money near and dear to their heart. If we could hit them where it hurts the most so that our residents can be better protected, I'll sign on to that any day and support an ordinance that does that. But not only does this ordinance hit them where it hurts most, it also gives or provides resources to those that are being victimized by gang members, by street gangs, and those witnesses that are willing to come forth and stand up for what is wrong in the community and stand up in supporting one another. This ordinance gives them resources and confidence that they can do so without repercussions. So I thank you so much once again, and for my colleagues that stand in support of this, to bring this new initiative to the city of Chicago. Thank you.
All right, let's try this once again. Let's start with question.
Marianne Ahern, NBC5, Mayor.
Right.
Whoops, excuse me, thank you. Mayor, I think folks are wondering about the reaction to Alderman Gardner's apology. Did you believe that was genuine, and was it enough?
Well, look, it's not for me to judge whether it was genuine or not, but I will tell you, I have concerns about the fact that the alderman chose the floor of the city council and in my view, put his colleagues, I think, in a very awkward position. I think the better course that still needs to happen is that he needs to stand at a podium like this, say what he has to say, and face questions from members of the media. I think that's truly the only way to put this matter behind him. And it's not for me to give him advice. He certainly hasn't asked for my advice, but I think that that's the better play. Members of the media, members of his community want to hear what he has to say, but not in a pre-scripted way. I think the way to do it is to communicate honestly, earnestly, but do it behind a podium and face members of the media and members of the public. I am heartened, however, to report that Alderman Gardner, after 2 weeks on, did meet with two of the women that he had used disparaging words in describing, and I'll leave it to them to determine whether or not that was sufficient.
Could I ask you about schools? There are some concerns we're hearing from parents who believe that the information is not accurate on the CPS tracker, and that
What information is that?
whether or not there is COVID in the schools.
Yeah.
And are there enough contact tracers? They feel as if there hasn't been enough information given. They don't believe that you've been forthcoming enough, and that's the major complaint that I've received.
So I know that there are some parents who have expressed some concerns. And I think the way to overcome that is to continue to communicate and communicate as effectively as possible. And I believe that CPS has done that, but needs to obviously meet those parents' concerns. This is something that, in terms of COVID cases in the schools, this is something we take very seriously. I will remind you that CPS spent over $100 million on COVID mitigation efforts, everything from retrofitting classrooms, ventilation, putting air purifiers in every classroom, making sure that there's sufficient PPE, hand sanitizers, and then instituting a range of different protocols in conjunction with the Chicago Teachers Union, which they ratified now several times. We did that in opening the schools last spring, did it again in opening the schools on August 30th. And there's very specific protocols when there is a case of infection in a classroom, in a school, in the system, and CPS will follow what those protocols are. They are in constant communication with Dr. Artie and her team at the Chicago Chicago Department of Public Health, and will continue to be so. So we take the safety of our students very, very seriously. And when I say we, of course that includes every single person at CPS.
Alex Smith.
Hi, Mayor. On the gang ordinance, I wanted to ask a little bit of the timing of the rollout. It seemed at first like the plan was to bring it up in advance of today so that it could potentially be approved today. How did that end up getting delayed?
So you all were speculating about a lot of things. We introduced the ordinance. The ordinance will eventually get to the Public Safety Committee. There'll be a full vetting of that ordinance, and then my hope is that it will be passed.
The ACLU of Illinois had a statement this morning that, among other things, called the ordinance undemocratic. They said that under state law, you have the power already to ask State's Attorney Fox to sue gang members. Why instead concentrate that power in an unelected corporation council?
I don't even really understand the nature of that question. It's not concentrating power in anyone. We file lawsuits on an affirmative basis all the time. Those lawsuits get filed, they go before a court, and the court is the arbiter of whether or not the city meets its burden of proof. So I don't even really understand that question. The Corporation Council doesn't have unilateral power to seize anyone's property, and that's not what this ordinance does. It allows and authorizes the Corporation Council to bring a lawsuit filed within a civil court, and then the chips will fall where they may based upon the determinations made by a circuit court judge. We need to have all the tools at our disposal to make sure that we are striking hard but fair blows against these violent criminal gangs that are terrorizing our neighborhoods. And for the people who are the critics, what I'd like to do is ask them to walk the streets of places like West Garfield Park, Austin, Roseland, other neighborhoods, Inglewood, across our city, where our people are afraid to come out of their homes. We have to push back against these violent criminal gangs, and we have to take their blood money that they are profiting from killing our children, our elders, and others. If we do not value the sanctity of life, as the mayor and members of the city council, what example are we setting for our residents who are crying out literally every single day and asking for relief? I'm going to always stand with our victims, and I'm going to always do everything I can and ask for the support of members of the city council to make sure that we are standing squarely with victims of violent gangs in this city. We have to do everything we can. The state law certainly is there, but as a home rule entity, we have the ability to take these and address these matters. And that's exactly what we propose to do.
Aaron Headley, Daily Line.
Hi, Mayor. Are you concerned at all with the delay in considering the ordinance to further deregulate where cannabis shops can open in the city? And how will you, I guess, present that will you present it at the same time as the budget address on Monday, or how will that?
It's going to be a regular city council meeting, and that committee will meet and report out on that matter.
Okay, and has it been decided yet? We're a month out from when city employees have to be vaccinated. What penalties will employees face if they are not vaccinated by October 15th?
Well, what we're focused on is continuing our discussions with the members of organized labor and leadership that represent public employees and getting as many people vaccinated as possible. That's really what we're focused on.
AD from Cranes.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Do you have a sense or any data about how much gangs are driving this year's violence versus regular interpersonal conflicts? And how can you be sure you'll be targeting the right gang leadership given issues with the database?
Well, obviously, what we are going to be doing is making sure that we are focused on those gangs that are very well organized, that have a real hierarchy, and they do exist here in the city. I don't want to disclose at this point which ones that we are going to be focused on. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We have got to get the ordinance passed first, but we have working with the Chicago Police Department and our federal partners clearly have a very good sense of which gangs have that kind of hierarchy, and we will be going directly after their assets.
And on the FOP contract, do you think the Lori Lightfoot who served on the Police Accountability Task Force would be satisfied with this contract?
Well, I'm the same person. I'm not different then than I am now. We fought hard to get this contract done. And in my view, it took way too long. but that's water under the bridge now. It's now been passed. We're going to be moving forward, and we're going to continue our negotiations with the FOP that ultimately will lead to arbitration on additional measures. There are some work rule changes as well as other additional reforms that I think are critically important to get into the contract. Obviously, we have a difference of opinion, or we would have already agreed upon those, but we're not going to stop fighting. Stop fighting for the reforms that are necessary to move our police department forward.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It sounded like you just said that you were working with the U.S. Attorney on identifying these gangs and going after them. Is that correct? Did I hear that right?
That's
No?
not. That's
Okay.
not what I. That's certainly not what I meant. What I said is that we will certainly call upon our federal partners, our state partners, our local county partners, but primarily we're going to be working with the Chicago Police Department, who on a regular basis is interfacing with these criminal networks and gangs and understands which ones really have, I think, a very sophisticated hierarchy, and we're going to be working with them to identify assets that should be seized.
I was just going to ask, have you already identified the assets of the gang leadership? And how do you plan to identify the gang members who would be responsible for turning over those assets and serving them?
Well, look, I'm not going to put the cart before the horse. We don't have an ordinance that's passed just yet, but obviously, we will be working to do that. We will meet the metes and bounds of the ordinance once passed, and then that will all be laid out for the public to see in a court pleading. And I think that that's an important point that I want to make sure we emphasize. We will file a complaint in civil court. The complaint will be served on any of the defendants that are identified, and then the court will be the arbiter of whether or not the city meets its burden of proof. The due process that exists in all court proceedings will be afforded to the defendants that are named in the complaint.
And just a question for Alderman Irvin. What is the Black Caucus's position on this ordinance?
We as a caucus have not taken a position on the ordinance. I can only speak for my experience in the residents of the 28th Ward, but the caucus itself in totality has not taken overall position on the ordinance.
All right, Heather Sharon, WTTW.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Mayor. Will there be provisions in this ordinance to ensure that Black and Latino Chicagoans are not disproportionately targeted, or is that inevitable since 95% of the people in the Chicago gang database are Black and Latino?
So again, let's be clear. We are going to be building cases based upon intelligence that's been gathered by law enforcement. We're not specifically relying upon the revised criminal enterprise system, but we will be building these cases and focused on those criminal, violent gangs that have a established hierarchy, and we're going to be targeting the leadership of those gangs.
With the budget address looming, do you want to give us a sense of what Chicago taxpayers can expect in that address? You've said that you said several months ago you didn't think a property tax hike was looming. Will there be other tax hikes that you will propose perhaps on Monday?
I think you'll have to wait until Monday.
All right, Craig Delmore, WBBM.
You don't want to be one of those people that skips to the last chapter to find out who done it.
Sure.
That's why they pay me the big bucks. Come on.
There's some suspense that needs to be is appropriate in this circumstance. But I feel very good about the budget that we will be proposing. You know, I think this will be, and obviously in thinking about this budget, we're not just thinking about this year, but we're thinking about next year. And I think we have some very innovative proposals to address a lot of what we heard through what I think has been probably one of the most robust public engagements leading up to the budget. We've got to be responsible fiscal stewards, and we propose to do that. Obviously, the law requires that we propose a balanced budget, and of course we do that. But I believe, and I've said many times, that I think budgets are not just math problems, they're value statements. And we are coming out of a pandemic that has devastated many communities, that has made the people that were vulnerable pre-pandemic even more vulnerable. So we have to address both of those needs. Be smart fiscal stewards, but also address the immediate pain that many individuals across our city are feeling. And I feel like our budget that we will propose to the City Council will strike that appropriate balance, but obviously the members of City Council will be the judge of that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Back to the ordinance. Suing gang members has been tried by other municipalities, some of them within our suburbs. And I believe the track record is kind of mixed on that, on their success. Yeah, as you pointed out, the burden of proof is pretty rigorous.
As it should be.
Yeah, and
As it should be.
and making sure the identification is valid of the people who are sued. What gives you confidence that this time will be more successful than, you know, some of the others that have tried this but not been able to make it stick?
Well, I can't account for what may have happened in the past, and certainly not in other jurisdictions. But we've spent a significant amount of time thinking about and learning from the lessons of the past. I believe that we are putting forth an ordinance that is fair, that puts the burden where it should belong, which is on the City of Chicago, to both make its case regarding the identification of a gang hierarchy and structure, and to identify assets and proceeds, as I said, and I say it unapologetically, blood money that these gangs have accumulated by killing innocents in our city. We have a responsibility and an obligation to do everything that we can to go after these individuals who have demonstrated almost on a daily basis that they have no regard for the sanctity of life. And there are people who have raised concerns, and I've seen a lot of hyperbolic statements on social media, which seems to be the place for a lot of hyperbole. But the bottom line is, people are afraid, and they are afraid of gangs. And we have to do everything we can to address those fears. And as I said before, I unapologetically will always stand on the side of our victims, who unfortunately oftentimes get short shrift when it comes to thinking about this issue of community violence. We can't afford to do that anymore. We can't be a great global city. We can't be a city that says we have a heart and that we're welcoming, that we want to come out of this pandemic in a very robust way, leave nobody behind. But part of leaving nobody behind is making sure that we are addressing the violence that's happening in our street, and that violence overwhelmingly is perpetrated by criminal, violent gangs.
And quickly on the FOP contract, you noted that there are a number of things that you still have to negotiate, and it's likely they're going to go to arbitration. I assume secondary employment is another one of those issues?
Yes, indeed.
And so is arbitration is one of those things that can go either way. Do you feel the case is strong enough that the city can get what it needs out of arbitration?
Well, I would refer you to the supervisor's contracts. Many of the things that we were able to get from reform and accountability, we actually got through arbitration. Now, arbitration can be a little bit of a crapshoot, and I have my own views about whether or not unaccountable arbitrators, many of whom don't live in the city of Chicago and have a financial incentive to split the baby many times. I have concerns about that process, no doubt. But we have to keep pushing for the things that we know are right. And at a bare minimum, we're going to keep pushing for the things that we already won through the supervisor's contract, secondary employment being one of them. That was an issue that I specifically pushed my team on, and I'm going to continue to push our team on. We're one of the few jurisdictions in the country that doesn't have any controls around secondary employment. And yet, when a police officer goes and works in a bar or restaurant on his side job, looking like he's the police, and something happens, guess who is accountable? the taxpayers of this city. Even if we say, hey, this person was on a side job, they weren't on duty. There's work to be done there, but there's other work to be done on other reform measures, and we continue to press that issue, and we will either reach impasse, we'll reach agreement, but we've got to keep working hard. There cannot be any retreat on reform and accountability, and no, not everything is in the measure that was passed today, but that work continues.
Mariah Wolfel from WB's.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Back to Alderman Gardner for a second. What actions do you want to see outside of the alderman's own actions? What steps do you want to see? Do you want to see him censured? Do you still want to see an Inspector General's investigation outside of the alderman holding a press conference, given he chose his action today to make a prepared statement?
Yeah, I made it very clear that the Inspector General absolutely should investigate the various allegations. I'm very concerned, in particular, well, look, I'm concerned about all of it. I'm concerned about what I view as extraordinarily misogynist language used against women. There's no place for that anywhere, public or private. There's no place for that. But I'm also concerned about the more recent allegations that have come out that suggest a couple of different things. One, that he denied residents access to city services simply because they didn't vote for him. That's not acceptable. I'm also concerned about the fact that he is alleged to have retaliated against individuals and businesses that were critical of him publicly. There's clearly no place for that. But I'm also concerned about the fact that he allegedly used the tools of city government to sanction businesses with whom he had a disagreement. I don't know the truth of any of these allegations, and neither does anybody else here, which is why we need an independent, fulsome, but expeditious evaluation by the Inspector General, and I hope that happens sooner rather than later.
Okay. On Inspector General's, Elaine Little has now resigned from her post. Were you aware of the investigation at her previous job with the county, and who vetted her at the Park District? And I have one follow-up on that question as well.
Well, I don't know Elaine Little. I don't believe that I've ever met her. I obviously was not involved in her hiring that was done by the Park District Board. I became aware of the allegations of her lapse in judgment and perhaps misconduct at the Juvenile Detention Center. I became aware of those allegations yesterday, and they deeply concern me. I think it's really important, as I've said over and over again, that this investigation of allegations of serious misconduct and, in some instances, criminal conduct be treated with due seriousness, and that the integrity of and the independence of the Inspector General has to be maintained. I think her resignation was appropriate under the circumstances. I think that had she remained in charge of this investigation, given what we now know, which she's acknowledged about her background, would have cast a pall over all the work that was done, and that does a disservice to the victim. What I think needs to happen immediately is that the Park District Board convene, hire a true independent investigator to pick up the work that has been done to date, evaluate it, and make sure that there are no stones that are left unturned. That person or people that are hired have to be beyond reproach, have total experience in conducting these kinds of investigations, and make sure that the work that is being done is trauma-informed. I worry about what these victims are thinking today. I worry about whether or not they believe that they're being treated fairly, that their allegations are being handled with the seriousness that they deserve. And it's an unfortunate set of circumstances, but I think her resignation was absolutely the right thing, balancing the equities. But the path forward has to be clear. It's got to be led by somebody who has unimpeachable credentials, not only in terms of their experience, but also their integrity. And that needs to happen as expeditiously as possible.
Okay, so
I will also just say, I think it's critically important, given that some of the women have alleged criminal conduct, that the state's attorney open up an investigation and investigate if that hasn't been done already.
Okay, so to be clear, a third-party investigator and not an interim inspector general.
Well, I'll leave it to the Park District Board to figure out whether or not they are going to appoint an interim. But I think for this investigation, it's got to be somebody who is independent, who has the exacting credentials, experience, and integrity, and that they will approach the work from a trauma-informed perspective, given the vulnerability of the women who have come forward and allege that they were mistreated or worse at the hands of former Park District employees.
Claudia Moreau, WBZ.
Hello. Some parents and teachers say that the lack of a permanent CEO at the school district is leading to general chaos and a lack of accountability. And I was wondering if you could comment to that, and also their comments that the search has been less than transparent.
Well, let me pick up the last part first. Let me remind people of the history of selection of CEOs. Normally what happens is a mayor comes, shows up at a press conference and says, here's a new person, board rubber stamps. What we did this time is have a very transparent, very robust process that solicited input from the public, particularly CPS parents, around what they'd like to see in the next CEO and the various challenges and opportunities for the district. I don't recall that that's ever been done before. And every board member was involved in the selection process. Those board members then, as we described back in June, passed on a set of recommendations to myself and the board president. And from that, we will make a selection. So the process has been exactly what we said it would be. And we will reveal the person that we've selected in due time. Now, as for this allegation that somehow there's chaos, if there was chaos, how would we have had 94% plus teachers show up on the first day? How would we have had 90+% of students show up on the first day? I reject that. And frankly, please check the source of those allegations. Because what I hear from parents all over the city is, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for taking every step that you could to make sure that our schools were reopened and safely, because our kids need to be back in school in person 5 days a week. That's what I'm hearing from parents all over the city, unsolicited, every single time that I am out. That's what I hear.
Erica Mazzanello, Newsroom.
Well, everybody already asked most of my questions.
Next time you'll be first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Okay, I have one question for my colleague Mariano Gilles. He wants to know if you are content with the amount of reforms that you get into this new contract, and if there is something that has not been achieved that you would like to achieve.
Well, you know, as I said before, I think there's more work that can be done for sure. I think your colleague Craig Dellamore asked me about secondary employment. That's something that's near and dear to my heart. In the supervisors, the arbitration for the supervisors, I testified personally about that and a couple of other issues. So there's more work to be done. Nobody thought that this was the end. It's a milestone, an important milestone. I think it's important after 4 years of a contract being expired that the hardworking men and women of the Chicago Police Department are going to get the back pay that they have earned and are entitled to, that we've done it in a responsible, fiscally responsible way, and that we have lined up and achieved many of the reforms that both the Progressive Caucus, the Black Caucus, and other folks have asked for and to be part of the police contract. We've gotten many of those things in this contract that was voted on and approved today. More work to be done for sure, but I feel very satisfied with the result.
All right, we're going to the back. Craig Wall, EC Senator.
Hello, Craig.
Hi, Mayor, I'm here. There's been a ton of questions asked about this gag ordinance already, but let me just, if you can address one particular thing. Alderman Rosana Rodriguez Sanchez said today that this is really just seems nothing more than a PR move. The ACLU saying these are going to be challenged immediately. And then there's the whole idea of, you know, what are these assets? These aren't like they're upstanding citizens who've got, you know, easy assets to necessarily go after. I mean, there's a lot of challenges, are there not, to even make this effective?
Yeah, of course there are. But we're up to that challenge. And as I said before, we have an obligation to the victims in the city, to the residents who do not feel safe, and identify gangs as a #1 problem. And we're going to address that. I never said it was going to be easy. It won't be. We will be put to our burden of proof as is appropriate. But a PR stunt, tell that to the victims of crime. Tell that to the victims in the 17th district that Alderman Rodriguez Sanchez frequently calls me about, demanding more police resources and more to be done. Have her walk in neighborhoods of West Garfield Park and Austin and Inglewood and Roseland and other areas of the city where residents are genuinely concerned for their safety. She can vote no. But I'm going to always stand with, as are my colleagues here and others who have already signed on to this ordinance, we're always going to stand on the side of the residents who simply want to live their life in peace. And we have to use every tool at our disposal to do that. If she doesn't think, and others don't think that that's appropriate, they'll be able to have ample opportunity to voice their concerns. That's what democracy is all about. But meanwhile, we're going to keep pushing forward to use the tools that are available to us to bring peace to these neighborhoods. And bringing peace has to be going after the hierarchy of these violent criminal gangs that have zero regard for the sanctity of life.
If I can follow up, can you give us an idea of when you talk about assets, what are you talking about going after, and how will you? Any and all. Assets get, a lot of these folks have cash that you see them flashing it on social media posts. Many of them have tricked out cars that they purchase from their drug proceeds, their blood money. Many of them are laundering money through property, through businesses. Wherever it lies, if we can identify it, we are going after it. And how will you determine if, presuming this passes, that it's a success? What's the benchmark? A success will be that we have cases that are upheld by courts, and that we then have the ability to go after and seize these assets, and that we will then take those proceeds and give them to support victims and survivors of violent gang activity in our city.
Mike Flannery, Fox News 32.
Hey, Mike.
Hi. You said initially you made a reference to our federal partners, but then you clarified that it appears you're not working with them.
No. Let me clear this up. We work with federal partners all the time.
Well, if I could so the question I want to put is, like you, I remember that GD trial, King Larry Hoover, and I remember Ron Safer getting up there with that army of IRS agents and showing it was a $150 million a year enterprise a quarter century ago. They have far more tools and manpower and women power than perhaps you do. Why doesn't Lausch bring these things?
Look, I can't answer for what happens or doesn't happen with other entities. All I know is we have a responsibility here at the city. We have to use every tool in our toolkit. I welcome others to join, whether it's the federal government, whether it's the state's attorney, the Illinois Attorney General. They also have tools at their disposal. But I'm the mayor of the city. Working with members of the city council, we're moving forward to make sure we're doing our part as well.
So let me ask, with the White Sox magic number as low as it is how concerned should we be, White Sox fans, that COVID and the Delta variant are going to derail the postseason?
Look, the Delta variant is real, and it is deadly. And people who are unvaccinated should be deeply concerned. When I look at the numbers and recognize that if you are unvaccinated, you're about 15 times more likely to die of COVID, you should be deeply concerned if you're unvaccinated. But for your question, What we're seeing is a starting of the flattening of the number of cases. Obviously, we continue to monitor the number of cases on a daily basis. I think we've reached our peak based upon what we've seen over the course of the last week. We still have a lot more progress to make before we get back down to where we were not that long ago, which was averaging about 30-something new cases a day. We're still in the 400s, but the increase has definitely flattened out. Hopefully that continues. But the bottom line here is we've got to keep working to get people vaccinated. I am deeply, deeply concerned with neighborhoods that we see, particularly across certain neighborhoods and zip codes on the south side, where the vaccine uptake continues to be, I think, really dangerously low. There's more work that we have to do. But I think White Sox, I'm hoping that I think they'll win the division. I'm hoping that they won't flame out in the first round, and that we'll have a nice postseason on the south side.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. That's a wrap. Go White Sox.
Thank you, everyone.